The Canton system, which was introduced in 1757, was the Chinese attempt to control trade with Western powers.
Eventually, the Canton system was ended by the First Opium War.
In the 19th century, European powers attempted to become the main producer for trade.
Prior to the 19th century, China controlled much of the global trade system.
Previously, attempts have been made to open up China as a consumer for European goods. One example of this was the Mccartney Mission in 1793.
George Mccartney, the man who led the mission, tried to convince the Chinese emperor to ease the trade restrictions that existed by allowing Britain to have an embassy in Beijing. The British also wanted to colonize the island of Hong Kong as part of their empire.
The mission was a failure, but the British continued to try and open up trade between the two countries. Eventually, the British decided that they had one good that the Chinese wanted desperately: opium.
By the 1830s, the British East India Company had caused for opium to be abundant in China. The selling of opium in China became a lucrative business for the British.
Since the opium trade was boosting the British economy, the balance of the Chinese trade became threatened. The Chinese decided to throw all the opium into the sea in protest.
The First Opium War was then fought because Britain and China were unsuccessful in all their negotiations and could not cooperate diplomatically.
During the First Opium War, the British opened Canton as a market for trade through naval force.
Xiamen, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai were also open to foreign merchants through the Treaty of Nanjing. This treaty gave Britain Hong Kong as well.
The Treaty of Nanjing was unfair towards the Chinese because it granted too much to the British, and the Chinese were forced to pay all the repercussions.
The conditions of this unequal treaty then led to the Second Opium War, also known as the Arrow War.
During the Second Opium War, France became involved because the issue had transformed into a fight between China and Europe rather than China and Britain.
The United States and Russia offered help in the war, but no military interventions occurred.
The first part of the Second Opium War ended with the treaties of Tientsin, which opened 11 new ports to Western trade in China. The Chinese, unhappy with these agreements, then began the second part of the Arrow War by not signing the Treaty of Tientsin.
This second part of the Arrow War ends at the Convention of Peking. At the Convention of Peking, China agreed to sign the Treaty of Tientsin. Tientsin was opened as another trade port. A new district was given to Britain. Freedom of religion was established in China. British ships were allowed to carry indentured Chinese to the Americas. Britain and France were each given 8 billion pieces of silver, and the opium trade became legal.